Yeah, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Christie David. I run a mortgage broking business called Atelier Wealth, where we specialize in helping property investors start out and scale up their property portfolio. As part of that journey, when you're starting out, or maybe as you're going through to this next level of property ownership and investment, there starts to become a little bit of internal chatter, whether it's kind of, I don't know how we do it, who's been there that's done that before us, and how do we get access to people that are willing to share their journey. And that's something that I'm really excited that we get this opportunity through our podcast to get access to people that are willing to share their journey, open their brain and give us as much insight and knowledge as possible. And Matt from Property Resource Shop, I want to say welcome onto the show, and it's great to have you with us, mate.
Mate, thanks for having me, Aaron. Pleasure.
And you're coming to us all the way from a beautiful part on the Sunshine Coast up in Buderim. Mate, welcome. How's life treating up there?
Mate, it's pretty nice up here. Sun's out, surf's up. So, we try and make the most of it and not take it for granted.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a beautiful spot. I think we're very blessed not only to call Australia home, but some wonderful parts inside this country where I think we get access to some of the best real estate in this country, really, isn't it?
That's part of the bonus as well, yeah.
Isn't it, mate? And I guess it's probably full circle that how you've ended up in such a beautiful part, because having read your story, and it's quite openly documented about your story and your journey, I think that's one real area that we want to have a chat about. So when I'm introducing a guest, I start with the 3 Ps. So a bit about yourself personally, a bit about yourself professionally, and then your property journey. If you can share with us as well, please, Matt.
Yeah. Gee, personally, it's been quite a ride the last 15 to maybe closer to 20 years now. I was working as a theatre technician all those years ago. That was my career, I suppose, just travelling around doing the lighting for different shows across the place, which is a lot of fun. But it had its time, and as I got into my 30s, I started to think about family and what other ways could I earn income? How do I get my time back? Probably very similar questions to a lot of people. So from there, that sort of took me into the property space. But yeah, personally, grew up in Melbourne, moved up to the northern New South Wales when I was about 13, went to school there and on the Gold Coast. Spent some time there and then moved to Mackay for a little while, did a fair bit of travelling overseas to Europe and Africa and India, Nepal. So love the travel stuff. And then started to settle down, like I said, once I got into my 30s. Not settled down, but just started to rethink things a little bit. You go, hang on, what are we doing all this for? What's the job for, and what are we trying to achieve here? So it took me a while to catch on to all of that. I hadn't read any personal growth books or property books or wealth creation books at that point. Just was happy to swap my time for money. But yeah, I guess when you start a family, you start to think differently and a bit less selfishly. And wonder, okay, what are the other ways of doing this? There's other people obviously making it work. And that's where it all sort of started for me, and went on a completely different trajectory into the property space.
That really is that penny drop moment for a lot of people, isn't it? I think when either you get married or you start to think about family, you're almost a little bit introspective, and you go, well, hang on, how is this going to play out for me? Because if you want to be a present parent, present partner, or a spouse, for example, be the best version of yourself, quite often, work will get in the way of that, or I guess your own limitations. And something you've touched on there is some of the deep work on yourself, self improvement, and going on that journey in yourself. So take me through what have you done in the way of self-development and investing into yourself as well, please, Matt?
Yeah, that's probably the craziest part, I suppose, but the most important part. So it's good to start there, I think. I guess for me, it was about the snap point was around time. So swapping money for time and asking for holidays, and having to put a form in and beg the boss and work overtime and not get paid for all those things. I was enjoying my job at the time, but then I started to fade out a little bit, and that's where I was starting to look at, okay, how much annual leave do I have? How much time do I have to work to get annual leave? And it was something like 40 hours to get 3 hours off or whatever it is. And that's when it sort of snapped and went, wow, okay, I've got to work a whole week to get 3 hours off. And that was the light bulb moment sort of thing of, I don't like that anymore. There's got to be a better way than that. And I could see the people in front of me that was in the job, and, I just didn't like what I saw, ahead of me. So yeah, I got into property, and that was the point where I did a few deals and they didn't quite work out, or they did work, but not to the sort of success I expected.
Okay.
And I was very much earning the same amount of money as I was in a job. And that's when I guess it was another snap point of, well, why am I bothering? You know, why am I putting blood, sweat and tears into these renos and subdivisions and risk and debt and time when I could just show up at work and get paid, you know? So that was when the realization of personal growth had to come into it. And I was told that when I first started out by Steve McKnight. He said, mate, the personal development goes hand in hand with the property journey. And I was very dismissive, you know, like whatever, I'm pretty confident. I know how things work. Just show me the numbers, show me the deals. Let's get this rolling. But there was some deep-seated stuff there that I had to address around self-worth, my relationship with money, and those things that were just limiting beliefs that were holding me back. So yeah, I ended up getting a life coach who I still work with today, you know, 15 years on. And she was very good at pushing the buttons and nothing too drastic. You know, I had a lovely childhood, great parents, but there was just some things that I picked up along the way that didn't serve me anymore. And she was able to unlock that a little bit. And at the time, I just figured, all right, 12 months personal growth, let's focus on that and tick that box. And then I'll be personally developed and I can go and do deals and everything will be fine, you know. But it was very much a case of, wow, this is a lifelong journey. You know, this is now something you got to work on all the time. And these days it's more of a pleasure, you know, rather than trying to run away from it or procrastinate about it. It's a case of, wow, here's an opportunity to grow. And now I have the tools to do that. Let's go get it. You know, whereas before it was a case of, well, it's somebody else's fault or I don't want to address that sort of stuff. And so I really took a coach to pull that out of me. And then I've continued to layer on from there. And, you know, it just becomes, like I said, a lifelong journey in trying to help yourself, help others, your loved ones to go through that process, you know, when you're ready.
Yeah. Something you mentioned before was, look, I was doing a few projects, the renovations, the subdivisions, and it sounds like you maybe broke even, learned a few lessons along the way. Having reflected on what you did then versus what you do now, what are some of those insights that you've kind of carried from that experience, do you think, Matt?
Yeah, leverage is the biggest one. Leverage. So in the beginning, I was really trying to do it all myself. So I came from a role that was managing a lot of people and a lot of stress. So I was very happy to just do everything myself. I didn't want to borrow anyone. And I actually had a transitional job in between that, which was being a postie. Yeah. And I did that for a couple of years, which was awesome. You know, it was like cruising around on the CT110, you know, delivering mail, no stress. And it was a great moment where I could sort of just shut everything off and focus on property and myself, but still earn a little bit of money, a very small amount of money, but enough to get me through. And yeah, it was after that I realized I was just burning myself out, you know. So I was the one on site painting the walls and installing kitchens and you know, just crazy stuff, you know, that probably shouldn't have been doing. But I just felt like, oh, if I do this, I'm saving money, you know, and I'll make a bigger profit, and just hadn't worked out the leverage side of things. So that went on for three or four deals. It took me a while to sort of cut that tool belt off and realize, hey, this isn't my expertise. It's about finding the deals and getting them funded rather than being on the ground. So once I worked that out, it became a lot better. I was able to scale it up a little bit. But the key thing was, the leverage and joint venturing with other people. So whether they found the deal, whether they brought the funds and vice versa, we would collaborate. And so every deal since that point has been a collaboration of some sort, whether it's been me funding another deal, somebody else is funding mine, sharing skills, resources. It's a far more lucrative approach, but far more pleasurable as well. You know, it's a pretty lonely game doing this alone by yourself. If you can bring in good people that have integrity with a win-win outcome, it becomes, you know, a great thing, you know. And getting those bits right, not as easy as it sounds, but if you can have that focus in the beginning, you can do so much more.
I'm glad you said it's not as easy as it sounds, because that's one of the hurdles that when we say, like, say, co-investing or a JV, for example, the first thing that I think a lot of people's mind goes to is what happens when things go wrong. And I'm sure you've crossed that bridge and on your own pathway, maybe things have gone wrong as well.
Yep.
How does someone mentally get past that? Or is that a legal way to get past? Or is there, we've got a few projects to be in bed together with someone before we pull the trigger, for example? What's been your experience with joints?
Yeah, it's a good question. And they're valid fears. You know, it's real for people. It comes back to mindset in the end and having knowledge. I mean, I put a resource together back in 2015 when we were in France. I had some spare time, and I put together something that explained how to actually do joint ventures, you know, from a theory point of view, because it was exactly what we'd been doing. So I put it together, and I remember thinking at the time, you know, wow, this is the answer for everyone. You know, this is how you move forward in property. No matter if you don't have a job, you don't have cash, you don't have skills, here's how you actually move forward. And so I put it together and launched it to my community, and it was embraced, and everyone loved it. But what I found was most people weren't implementing the strategies, you know, because it was too scary. And that's something that I overlooked. I just figured, well, here's how you do it, go and do it. And it wasn't supposed to be just another book or a trophy you put on your shelf. It was something that I wanted people to actually embrace and do something with and make money with. We ended up turning it into an event and holding people's hands and taking them through it more personally. But I think the key of going through that whole process was, first of all, education. That's the basis of everything, just learning, okay, what are the ways of doing it? Then the mindset component. So what is your risk profile? What is your burning desire? How do you get over this fear and push past it? Because if that's going to hold you back and debilitate you, well, then it's not going to happen anyway. So working on yourself in that space. Most importantly, having good people around you, really vetting people properly, not just going into a deal because they've got the deal, you've got the money, or we're best mates and let's go and make $1 million together. It's about doing the due diligence on the people involved, even more so than the deal itself, from my experience. Obviously, the deal's got to stack up and it's got to get funded. But it's even more important to have a process of understanding the other people involved and how they react under different circumstances, particularly stressful ones or where there's conflict, because every project has its challenges and curveballs. There's going to be some stress. So knowing that you're working with somebody that has that same win-win approach, that same integrity, they're not trying to get a win-lose or trying to rip anybody off. They've got really good intentions. And choosing well in the first place with that side of things is just critical. And then there's the logistics to it, obviously, of just making sure that you've got complementary skills and resources. It's not just everyone with money going into the deal. Someone's got to have the deal. Someone's got to have the skills. Someone's got to have the funding, and putting that together in a collaborative effect with the right intentions.
Yeah, well said. Because I think the traditional purchases or joint ventures, two friends or siblings, for example, and it's something that you may know, but like you're saying, how do they react when things go off the rails for a little bit? And quite often I say to people, I'm like, do you value the friendship more or do you want the outcome? And I think we've got to be open about the risk, but also very clear about there's rewards to be had here. So like anything, you got to go through a little bit of pain sometimes to get to the other side. And you've probably seen this. So something you've touched on very briefly was the community. So take me through how did this get initiated in terms of starting? Because you start with, I'm sure, very small, and now it's snowballed into a larger community. So take us through, I guess, the idea with community building as well. It's been a phenomenal journey. I mean, and it was never set up to be any sort of business structure, joint venturing, anything like that. It was really just a love gig in the beginning where I was starting out in property. I needed support. I wanted to share the journey with others. So it was literally 10 of us that got together, and it doesn't have to be 10 people, it could be one person, where you just together on the same journey, helping each other, which is exactly what it was. We'd go out to dinner once a month and talk about property, share referrals, just support, because you don't always get that from your friends or family. They're sometimes might want to drag you down because of their own limiting beliefs. So getting around others that are going to lift you up is really important. That group, because we kept that
that level of integrity, that purpose around what we were doing at the top of the list as it evolved. So it went from 10, to 100. We're squeezing 50, 60 people into a lounge room at one point, talking about property, and it just kind of got a little bit out of control, to the point where I nearly gave it up because we were putting a lot of effort into keeping this running. I had to hire a venue and get speakers, and I was not getting paid for it. And I was thinking, well, hang on, this is holding me back in other ways. So what am I doing this for? I'm so glad I didn't, though, because it just meant we had to lift our game as well. And as it grew, we grew with it, and we embraced that, structured it a bit better where there was, we have a venue, we have sponsors, we have good content, but the whole lounge room feel, hasn't changed over the 15 years. Yes, there's probably 10,000 in the group now. We get about 100 come along every month, but it's still that same feel. It's not a pitch fest or there's no hidden agendas. It's literally come along, listen to some good content. There's some people that share their projects, some case studies, and just be around others that are wanting to learn, and all skill levels are in the room. There's some full-time property developers there, people doing some commercial stuff. There's renos and subdivisions happening, and there's people that have just turned up for the first time and they have done nothing, haven't even bought their own home. They just know they want to get into property, and they just figure that was a good place to start, which it is, just being around others that are going to support you in that journey. So we just continued to foster that community, and we still run it because we get the same benefit. We show up every month, and I facilitate it, and I network like everybody else. But we get to meet new people. We get to see deals getting done. We get to be a part of opportunities that are there. That's why we continue to show up for the same reason as everyone else. And then that community is kind of refined itself into other more boutique events around joint venturing, which are a lot smaller, but they're a lot more focused around having people that are intentional about what they're doing. Whereas the Brisbane Property Networking Group is very much a public group. Anyone can come along and we're going to be talking about property, but you're also going to be looked after on the night. There's integrity there. People often walk away having that sense of comfort that they haven't been hoodwinked in any way. It's just good people wanting to help each other. And someone called it the AA for property investors a couple of months ago, just a support group.
Nice one. It's and that's what I think it's what they say, a rising tide lifts all boats, for example. So you want to be around that level of community, iron sharpens iron. So a couple of things come to mind where I'm like, there's no agenda, nothing's being sold, for example. But that peer-to-peer type learning and sharing is probably where a lot of investors gain that level of confidence because they're speaking the language amongst each other. They can feel the pain amongst each other. They can, how did you do that? And everyone's willing to share. So it's not like there's anyone that's closed off to, they want to see each other do well, is the bottom line.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, it's very uplifting, inspiring when I get members of the group to actually present their projects. And sometimes there's a couple that have had losses, where someone's actually got up, been really vulnerable and said, yep, stuff this one up. The market caught me out, interest rates went up. I've decided to swallow the bitter pill and take a loss so I can move on to the next thing. Yeah. Massive learnings for people watching that, and then there's others that have done some amazing stuff and been very inspiring. So, and even the journey's gone for so long now, there's people that have been in the room and then 3, 4, 5 years later, they're the ones at the front presenting their projects. And they've had that initial inspiration from just being in the room, seeing someone else present. Yeah. And go, wow, okay, that's because it's done very, in layman's terms, it's not complicated stuff. It's someone renovating a house, it's someone subdividing into two and selling them both off for profit. There's other more advanced strategies there, but really it's very simple stuff to follow, and people feel like they can do it. And hopefully that's what happens. They become inspired and then do that themselves and then come back and share it with the group.
Yeah, nice one. Do you have a bit of a guide, say, for someone that's first time? It's a common example is we've got a couple they bought their home, there's equity in it. Now they're looking for their first investment property or their first project, and the incomes are quite good, so the borrowing capacity is there. Where and again, this is not intended to give advice. This conversation is general in nature, but what's some of the examples that you've had with people that have gone on just to kind of dip their toe in the water or start with their first project as well? What would that typically look like?
Yeah. So it starts with firstly understanding, what are you trying to get out of this? Are you trying to build a portfolio with passive income? Are you trying to do some deals that provide some chunk cash for whatever you need to purchase or pay debt down or whatever it is? So getting clear on that first, I think, is really important, because that'll determine the strategy. Whether you're interested, maybe it's just you want to buy and hold strategy, and that's all you want to focus on. That's okay. I guess we don't focus on that a lot because we're more doing active approaches. But I would kind of say, work out the resources you've got first, and where do you want to go? Do you want to do your own projects? Great, let's get clarity on that first. If you don't, cool, there's other options that you can buy and hold and build a portfolio in that way. If you want to be more active and learn this sort of stuff, I'd encourage people to be, if you've got equity or you've got cash, to be able to fund somebody else's deal that's doing what you want to do. Because I kind of see that as a mini mentorship, where you're actually part of somebody else's project. Because if you're starting out and you're wanting to do a subdivision, it's not rocket science, but it takes time to find the right deal and get the consultants together and implement the strategy. And there's a lot of risk along the way that you've got to mitigate. So by piggybacking onto someone else, I think it's really valuable, as long as it's the right people, the right project, and you can bring something to the table. It might be a couple of hundred in equity or cash that you have. Instead of going and buying your own property or doing your own deal, maybe just make some return on that capital, but also learn, from somebody else that's actually more proficient at it. And not only learn, but just be a part of it, because if you're bringing something to the table, you have the right to be saying it's yours as well.
Yeah, nice one. And you nailed it. That's what I was hoping the conversation would go, which is quite often people jump to the property side. I'm like, well, what's the strategy and what are you actually looking for the outcome here, as opposed to, I think this is the site. And I think we've missed the point. We need to go upstream a little bit more and go, what are you looking at? Why are you doing that, for example, as well, which I think you kind of touched on, which is great.
Yeah, really important. And I skipped over that as well. I just got into projects. I did doing renos because that's all I could get my head around. I figured I was a little bit handy. And I just thought, let's just go and make some money, with absolutely no idea of where I was going with it. So you do have to unravel it a bit and go, well, and I often ask people, about what are you doing here? Why property? What's the point? I want to be financially free. Yeah, but why? Like, what's the next thing? Like I've been through a number of mini retirements sort of thing. You can only play golf so much and sip cocktails on the beach so much. You need some purpose around that. So if you're starting to think about that now, and it's not an easy question to answer, but if you're thinking about it, planting the seeds, it does set you on that trajectory around what strategy you need to be implementing and how to make it easy for yourself. It doesn't have to be difficult. You can collaborate with good people out there and just find where you're trying to go with it, because you'll have your niche in there somewhere. But if you know what the end game is for yourself and not comparing it to anybody else, you're emotionally connected to that. It's a lot simpler to get out of bed and give it a crack.
Awesome. Something again you glossed over before, which is, we spent some time in France, and I've read in your story that you spent, I was about 2.5 years in France.
Yeah.
Again, something that a lot of people aspire to, which is, hey, can I guess with COVID, be a digital nomad, for example, or just take some time out for myself and my family. So there's a few questions behind this, is the how and the what and the where. So take us through that all kind of come about. Was that just like, hey, look, spur of the moment, or was this intentional that you go, we actually want to pick up and move somewhere and experience life somewhere else as well?
Yeah, it was very intentional. And it did come from, like most things, a snap point that happened along the way. So we were doing deals. I was out on site a lot.
Yeah.
Everything was rolling really well. Building the community, joint venturing, there was good cash flow.
Yeah.
But it's kind of got to a point where it felt like it was a job again. I was getting a little bit, hang on, what are we doing here? I feel like I'm packing my lunch and ironing my shirt again to go to work. I don't like this feeling. And so we just had to step back, and the kids were quite young then. And we just took some time out to go, well, what do we want to do here? You know, and we always wanted to learn another language. That was something that my wife and I were very passionate about. We'd both been to France separately before. Honestly, we could have gone anywhere, really. It was just that France seemed to be the place for us because we knew a bit of the language, and we were both excited by it. So, yeah, we chose to do that. And that decision then allowed us to, I suppose, give ourselves the permission to change what we were doing, you know, not do the deal so actively anymore. You know, how can we do this more passively? Because once we made the decision and bought the tickets, there was probably 12 months of preparation in how do we run the meetings from France? How do we continue to stay in the market from France? It forced me to be better at delegating and finding ways to do things more remotely. It's pretty easy these days after we've just had COVID, but back then it was quite challenging. But we had this real clear purpose of what we wanted to do. We didn't quite know what it was going to look like. In the early days, it was just going to be 12 months. I just had a bit of a buffer in the savings, and we had money in projects that was providing passive income. So I guess we were going to make less money because we weren't as active in the deals, but we had enough to work with. And we sold the cars, we sold the house, we were renting before we left, literally had 4 suitcases, flew into Paris, hired a car, and just figured, okay, we'll just drive around France and see where we're going to position ourselves. And once we got there, I think I underestimated how big France was because we were driving for a long time, trying to work out where we were going to sit. And it was probably about 3 months of just enjoying the country, but also in the back of my mind, hey, we got to settle somewhere. We got to get the kids in school. We really want to experience, you know, something very local. You know, not the only prerequisite was there shouldn't be any English speaking people there. So we weren't going to be in South of France. Had to be somewhere where it was genuinely local. We settled on this place in the middle of the Loire Valley, a little country town with about 3,000 people, and just stumbled across it. Felt right. Met some really nice people there, and that was the key to it, really, the network that we're exposed to and how they helped us embed ourselves through finding somewhere to rent. And because it's a very different property market there, you don't just go in and rent something. It's very cliquey. No, there's not a lot of entrepreneurial stuff going on. And then you got the language barrier and all the logistics with it, and then 2 little kids in the backseat, you know, that we're getting a bit sick of it all. But yeah, once we found that place, it was everything just opened up. You know, we found a house that someone was actually in separation, so we were able to take their house. Met the principal of the school, met some friends. We were in those sort of underground parties, you know, where you could see what was really going on in the town, and that's what we wanted. You know, so from there we ended up extending our stay, and we could have stayed there for 5 years really, but we also had an older son back home, and we wanted to make sure he was okay. So we ended up cutting it short after 2.5 years. But it just completely changed our view of everything. And how time is so important, and doing those things. And look, it's not like it cost a lot of money to do that either. You know, it was more about the choice. Hey, we want to do this, you know, so let's find a way to do it. You know, not get caught up in we have to be in a 9 to 5, or we have to keep doing deals and keep building wealth for retirement. Hang on, let's just enjoy the moment while we can. And that's really served us well, even when we've come back, just to choose deals based on our lifestyle, you know, not just about the money. Money, of course, the money is important. We want to make money and create wealth and passive income and all that. But there's another side to it as well, where we want to live a life. It's not about just getting to 65 and retiring. So we bring that into all our decision making. And I dare say we'll be back in France at some point. Point soon when the kids finish school. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, what I love hearing about your story is a similar chat with another guest that we've had recently, which is the investment. People think they're investing into an asset, which is property. I'm like, you're investing into yourself, which that's paid huge dividends, right? Return on investment. And then it's going, well, hang on, what are we actually doing here? We can have money in the bank, but if we're not living life and having these experiences, what are we acquiring? We're acquiring property, but we're not actually living life. And I think that's something that I really just loved about your story, which is it's real. It's quite authentic in the way that, hey, we're just running our own race here. We're not trying to compete. but we still want to kind of build our wealth. And I think underlying all that is it's intergenerational wealth through property, and your children are beneficiaries of you and your wife making smart, confident decisions that are going to change the entire trajectory for your kids' lives as well, which parent, your entire outlook changes going, this is not for me anymore. This is for my family. And I think property, if you can unlock it, does a wonderful job in changing an entire family's wealth trajectory as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Even just them seeing that, like not the end result, but seeing the decisions you're making along the way, that, hey, you can do it a different way.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll support whatever you want to do. Go to uni, become a doctor, become a real estate agent. I don't care, as long as you're happy. Yeah. But just know there's all these other avenues to explore, and hopefully that's rubbing off through osmosis with them as well, as well as the benefits of having a property portfolio down the track. So, I think it's the reason for everything. What you pass on to your kids and for yourself, like you say, investing in yourself and enjoying. We're here to enjoy ourselves. We can get a little bit caught up in overachieving, and depending on your personality, I've definitely burnt out a few times trying to do that. But I think you hit the nail on the head with running your own race, not comparing yourself to, oh, hang on, they're doing commercial, or I should be at that phase by now. Just hang on a minute, just bring it back to what you want and what you're happy with. And that's okay. It's fine.
Sage advice, mate. Thank you very much. And this is what I love about this opportunity, especially for our clients, is getting access to someone like yourself. They hear it from you in your words, and some people gravitate to that message and they'll hear from other people and they resonate with their message as well. So I want to say thank you very much for being open and sharing. And I know that you've been on a few podcasts, and I've heard your story, which is why I was excited that you were happy to say yes and jump on here, which is the way that we can amplify someone's message and get out. Your message is going to inspire someone else. It's going to inspire someone else. And that snowball effect is ultimately going to create better quality investors in the market, making good quality decisions. You and I, if we can help someone in some way, shape or form, it's even just through an off the cuff conversation with someone. It's like, hey, look, we've paid it forward in that sense as well. So thank you very much. For
No, my pleasure, mate. I'm always happy to do this sort of thing. If it can, the funny thing is you don't know where that inspiration is going to happen. You're just dropping a pebble in the pond. And I often see it in our community, years down the track, where they've heard something, and maybe not necessarily from me, but just they've been a part of it, and it's spurred them to do something else or change their life or change the scenarios that they have with it, and create something more amazing. And then they pass it on. So it's a good feeling, where you can affect others like that. It keeps that purpose alive and keeps you getting up and doing it, because you get to a point where you've got enough money. Okay, so there's got to be something else. And if you can add that value, I think that just keeps the whole wheel turning, and if people want to embrace that, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Well said, mate. And just the conversation, it's almost such great timing, because this exact conversation with a new client going, okay, they know they want to do a JV, and I think they're just so stuck in the mechanics of it. Do we do it through a trust? Do we do it through a company? Do we do it through discretionary? Should it be unit? And I'm like, I think we just need to kind of go upstream a little bit more and go, we need to make sure that we're aligned. And I feel like this, like you're saying, if it can affect one person, I'm like, bang, straight away, I'm like, this episode is going to be perfect for them to have a listen to. They'll then try and get access to your community. And just on that point, how does someone get access to, say, yourself or your community? What's the best way to be involved, Matt?
Yeah, so we've got a few. Best thing is probably just go to our website, propertyresourceshop.com. There's a whole bunch of great free content on there. Some downloads you can get access to. There's more information about our property launchpad, which is the joint venture event that I touched on before. We've got a membership site with a whole lot of online content that you can get access to there. And then also our networking group meetings. If you're in Southeast Queensland, you can come along to those every month. The membership site also allows you to access that virtually. So we Facebook Live every event, so you can actually tap into it we get a lot of people from all over the country, even overseas, that tap in live, which is great. And then we record it, send it out to you as well. So if you're not in Southeast Queensland, there's ways and means of connecting to the community. There's just reach out to me if anyone's got questions. I'm always happy to help, and just keep people moving on that path. If I can play a small part in that, then it's my pleasure and my privilege, to be able to do that. So yeah, propertyresourceshop.com is probably the best place.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I'd love to include your resources. So include some of those downloaders, what you mentioned, access to your Facebook and your online community as well, which we'll share in the show notes. And if you've got any questions for Matt, myself, for example, drop us a line. We'll include our contact details in the show notes below. And if you've got a review or you got some feedback on this episode, we'd love to hear that from you as well. And that's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Until next time, take care.